Hi, and welcome to the Dream Season podcast, an oral history of the 1989-90 UConn men's basketball season, also known as the Dream Season. This is episode 13. The Big Dance begins. Not long after the Huskies left the Madison Square Garden floor after celebrating the Big East Tournament Championship, their attention turned to the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament had changed drastically since the last time UConn made the tournament, in March of 1979. That year, only 40 teams participated, with 24 of those teams receiving byes into the second round. In 1985, the tournament expanded to 64 teams, and all byes were eliminated. Before the 1989-90 season began, UConn was the only member of the Big East who had not made an NCAA tournament since the conference was established in the 1979-80 season. As the Huskies progressed through the regular season and an NCAA tournament bid became a near certainty, speculation began about where UConn would be sent for their first round game. As luck would have it, the Hartford Civic Center was one of the host sites for the East region of the tournament. However, NCAA tournament rules stated, "For all preliminary round sessions, institutions shall not be assigned to their home court." The good news for UConn? The NCAA defines a home court as the court where a team plays more than half of its regular season games. Thanks to Gamble Pavilion opening in the middle of the season, the Huskies had only played 8 of their 18 home games at the Civic Center. The bad news was that the NCAA selection committee had frowned upon giving teams a home court advantage in recent years, but winning the Big East tournament may have forced the NCAA's hand. Here's the beginning of the 1990 selection show.
It's the focal point of college basketball. The home of the NCAA and the selection committee has been sequestered here since Thursday, deciding the 64-team field for the 1990 NCAA basketball team. And good afternoon again, everybody. I'm Tim Brandt. You think this is easy? They just walked in with these 64 teams just moments ago. Again, the 6th straight year. There are 30 automatic bids, obviously 34 at large, seeded both competitively and geographically in an effort to balance out all 4 regions. So speculation and deliberation have now ended. Let's go to the boards and check them out. Starting in the East. Now, these games to be played in Hartford, Connecticut, March 15th and 17th, Thursday and Saturday. The number 1 seed, the University of Connecticut, their first ever Big East title, first trip to the tournament since 1979. And UConn plays Boston University, which won the North Atlantic title in Hartford. So they go back where they had all that success. Indiana, many thought was a bubble team. The Hoosiers are in. And will go against California. First trip since 1960 when they played for the title under Pete Newell. Number 5 seed is Clemson. Now that is 6 straight postseason trips for Cliff Ellis's team. First ever ACC regular season title this year. And the Tigers will play BYU, led by Marty Hawes and Andy Toulson. The number 4 seed is LaSalle, led by the L Train, Simmons. The Explorers have the best record in the country, 29-1, and matched up against Southern Mississippi, their first appearance ever in the tournament.
As expected, the Huskies earned the number 1 seed and were placed in the East region in the Hartford sub-regional. Their opponent would be the 16th seed Boston University Terriers on Thursday, March 15th. In his role as UConn's Director of Athletics Communications, Tim Tolligan had been preparing for the NCAA tournament games in Hartford for months. UConn, as the host school, had to handle nearly all the logistics related to the 6 games being played over the first 2 rounds. Tim and his staff were responsible for all of the incoming media. Here's Tim recalling that Sunday evening following the Big East Championship.
It's interesting because that was on a Sunday, and of course the thing was coming out, the pairings. So Jim kept the team there, and when the pairings came out, he sent the team home on the bus. But he and Tate and Steve had to stay because all the media, after we won the championship, they stayed and they wanted to talk to him, 1, about being a 1 seed, 2, about being given, and that was the last year, as you remember, that we got lucky because we had played less games in Hartford than in Gamble, or Gamble and Stores, counting the Fieldhouse games. And so you could still host because it wasn't considered your building. And so we're also not, I was supposed to host, much like previous years, the 4th time the NCAAs, that's my tournament. I got to run that. And we worked it out that I was able to spend some time with the team. But we stayed there Sunday night. And then, which was a little unusual, I think, for all of us, we had a limo wait for us. And a limo took Jim and myself and Steve and Tate back to Stores. And we had the Big East Championship trophy in the car with us. And that was pretty neat. That was a pretty neat thing.
Mike Enright, who worked under Tim at the time, also recalls the whirlwind that was the March of 1990.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, professionally, I was 2-3 years out of college. I was a rookie in the SID world, so it was a great experience for me. But Hartford was always a great basketball city, and even when UConn, like Tim mentioned, playing poorly, we were the building at the time was a top-notch facility. The games would sell out, and people had a real appetite for the tournament. So as the season's going on, we know we're going to be hosting the first and second rounds, and the assumption is the team will be going on the road because that's just what we assumed. There were 7 other sites, and they probably weren't going to send. Our rating wasn't going to be high enough, certainly high enough to get a home court. And I remember making plans with Tim that he'd stay back in Hartford, and I'd go on the road with the team, and he'd catch up to us when the games were over. And again, a lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff that people didn't know, or it's just kind of germane to our business. I mean, this was before email and, before laptop computers. And I remember lugging printers on the train to New York City, printers that were the size of like a car, on the Metro North. And I actually went home after the Big East semifinal in New York, because people remember that time the Big East tournament ended on a Sunday, on Selection Sunday. The big regional TV for the beginning of the Big East tournament, and then Saturday was a doubleheader on CBS. Amazingly, the Knicks used to usually play Saturday night at Madison Square Garden after the 2 Big East tournament games, and then on Sunday would be the Big East final. So again, you couldn't work remotely or do anything like that. So I remember taking the train out of New York City Saturday night to come back and work in Stores on Sunday to get ready for UConn in the NCAA tournament and host the NCAA tournament. And candidly, it was a little bit of a depressing feeling, all these fans coming into New York. And in fact, I saw a few people like, where the heck you going? I said, oh, part of the job. And, but yeah, and then all of a sudden UConn wins the Big East tournament and we get picked. And in some ways it was actually easier for us because we were all able to stay home and work together on A, hosting the tournament, and then B, having UConn in it. But it was it just, the fairy tale kept going. It was just another part of the amazing season.
Jim Calhoun was pleasantly surprised by the selection committee's decision. Quote, "I've been saying all week that I never thought we'd play in Hartford. I really didn't. Based on history, I felt it wouldn't come about. In turn, I think moving the team that just won the Big East tournament out of the East wouldn't have made much sense. Therefore, I think we sort of forced the committee to go by the rule book." End quote. 5 other Big East teams made the tournament: Syracuse, Georgetown, St. John's, Villanova, and Providence. On Monday, the good news continued for UConn. The Associated Press released their final top 25 poll of the season, and the Huskies, with a record of 28-5, were ranked number 3, their highest ranking ever. UConn's opponent in the first round, Boston University, qualified for the NCAA tournament by winning the North Atlantic Conference tournament, defeating Vermont 75-57. Papa Cozy and WTNH Sports detail the rivalry between BU coach Mike Jarvis and Jim Calhoun.
What about the team that UConn plays tomorrow night, Boston University? First, you should know that regardless of what Jim Calhoun says, there's no love lost between the coaches. 3 years ago, Jim's first at UConn, they had a game at BU. On the way there, the Connecticut team bus got into a serious accident. Lots of damage to the bus, a serious injury involved in the other vehicle. The team arrived 2 hours late. Jim wanted to postpone the game. BU coach Mike Jarvis would not oblige him. UConn lost the game. Now, as for this year's BU team, the Terriers 18-11. They played 4 NCAA tournament teams during the year. They lost to 3 of them. but they did beat East Tennessee State. BU and UConn played two common opponents. Both beat Maryland. BU split with the University of Hartford. BU qualified automatically for the NCAA tournament by winning its conference tournament. UConn against BU. Calhoun against Jarvis.
I was an assistant coach and worked with Jim for a year. Taught him all he knows.
So my relationship with him has been very good because we're 100 miles apart. No.
I'm excited. I really, really am, and I want everybody to know that. And Jim Calhoun will be there before you know it.
Well. As that is a backdrop, let's go back to Kenny, who's with Jim. Jim, you don't really hate this guy, do you?
I don't hate anybody. I really don't. I think hate is an emotion that you can't really afford to have. I don't have a close relationship with Mike Jarvis, but I don't have a close relationship with an awful lot of coaches. But the way I look at things, I enjoyed beating probably my best friend in coaching, PJ, very, very much, and then had a great meal with him afterwards. And we'd love to enjoy beating Mike Jarvis's PU team, but it's not really Mike or it's not PJ. This is a tough competitive business, and very simply, a couple things happen along the way. Right now, all the orders is Connecticut versus Boston University, and I really honestly mean that because, after somewhere around 9:20 tomorrow night, it won't make any difference about Jim Calhoun or Mike Jarvis.
Assistant coach Dave Lato downplayed the reported animosity between the two coaches.
Yeah, no, I think the history, Mike had worked for Coach and he was a Bostonian and, Patrick Ewing and all those. So it made for a great story. I think enough time had passed that it became a part of the preparation or the part of the story. If it did, it was by, the Horde or to create a good story or whatever. We didn't think we spent a lot of time. They had, I remember Stephen Key, and he was more a guy that we focused in on than Mike Jarvis or Boston University. And again, I think the excitement of being at home, as you mentioned, with the technicality of not playing as many games at the Civic Center, staying in the Marriott in West Hartford, which was, our home base for a lot of our home games, and practicing at Central Connecticut. And, there was so many familiarity issues that I don't know that we focused on that part of it as much. I know at least I didn't. But I think obviously the media did to make it a little bit more spicy. But going in there and playing real well is something I remember that we did to take care of all of those things, both on our team and from a media standpoint.
The Huskies were listed as 18-point favorites over BU. Jim Calhoun knew that wouldn't make a difference once the game tipped off. Here he breaks down the Terriers with Ken Strayhorn.
Jim, so let's talk about Connecticut and Boston University. How do you describe this team and how do you attack this team?
Well, the first thing is Steve Key is a terrific player. He would play for most Big East teams. He's 6'4". He's a tremendous basketball player. I was talking to Mike Gorman, who has seen him 3 or 4 times, and he was saying simply that he thought that Steve Key was much like Tate George, a little more explosive as a scorer, and is really the key to their basketball team. But they have another kid, Moses inside at 6'8", 250, patrols the middle very well. Kid Brigham, who was MVP of the NAC tournament, 25 points, 12 rebounds. Daly, a terrific shooter. Generally speaking, a well-coached team, a team that does things very, very well. And I think playing from that position myself, as a former coach in Northeastern, I realized that Mike will have his team very relaxed, feeling that once again the pressure is on us. I don't feel pressure on us, but nevertheless I think that's what they'll feel, which will make it once again probably in some ways psychologically easier for them.
The Huskies were looking forward to regaining the services of Rod Sellers. Sellers, who did manage to play 2 minutes in the Big East Championship game, was reporting that his knee was feeling better, and an MRI showed only a partial tear of his medial collateral ligament, which should heal on its own. On Wednesday afternoon, each team in the Hartford Sub-Regional, with the exception of Indiana, held an open practice at the Civic Center. For many fans, this would be their only chance to see UConn or any other team, as tickets for each session had sold out long before UConn was slated to play in Hartford. The issue of acquiring tickets even trickled down to the players. When asked about the pressure of playing in the NCAA tournament, here's how Tate George responded.
I want to ask you something. A lot of pressure playing throughout the Big East in the regular season and in the Big East tournament. This is going to be a new experience in the NCAA tournament. Do you think there's even more pressure? I mean, I can't imagine there being more pressure playing BU than there would be playing Syracuse at Madison Square Garden. Is that correct?
Well, I think the pressure for us is basically the tickets. We, as college athletes, only get 4, and we've been trying to ask the coaches and Mike Enright and Mr. Tyler, can they give us 2 more, and it's against the rules, so it's hard as far as the tickets.
Mike Gorman and Ron Perry set the stage from the Civic Center.
It's NCAA tournament action. The Boston University Terriers, the champions of the North Atlantic Conference, are set to take on the Big East champions and the #1 seed in this region, the Connecticut Huskies, getting an unusual home game of sorts here in Hartford. Two teams have already advanced into the NCAA round of 32. Clemson, a close win over BYU, and LaSalle pulling away in the second half. Those two clubs will meet on Saturday. We will determine two more in the round of 32 before the night is over here in Hartford. I'm Mike Woolman, along with Ron Perry. First for the University of Connecticut Huskies, a great season. One senior on the squad, but he has been key to this club, and that's Tate George.
Well, Tate George has done a great job throughout his career for UConn. Leads the team this year in assists. He's the all-time man in assists and steals, as you can see, and he'll handle the ball a lot in this game. Only senior on the squad. They'll look for his leadership, and Jim Calhoun will clearly need him on the floor to direct people. The adrenaline will be flowing for UConn tonight. He'll be a steadying influence.
This crowd will certainly be in it. BU, a huge underdog coming into the game. If they are going to have a hope tonight, Stephen Key, their point guard, has to come up big.
He really does, and Mike Jarvis keeps the ball in Stephen Key's hands for much of the game. The North Atlantic Conference Player of the Year, leading scorer, leading assist man. Look for Connecticut to try to keep it out of his hands with their pressure defense. He has to come up big, get the ball to Billy Brigham, deliver. Mark Daly has to shoot well. BU has to play a near-flawless type of game. This place will erupt when UConn gets it going tonight.
UConn started the same five who carried the team down the stretch of the season. The two freshmen Scott Burrell and Nadav Hennefeld at forward, Tate George and Chris Smith in the backcourt, and at center, Rod Sellers. Both teams started the game tight, missing their first 8 shots combined. But then the Huskies started to click, both offensively and defensively.
Smith trying to set himself.
It's like a zone now by Boston U. It's a 3-2 zone. Force the jumper.
And Smith knocks down a three.
Now that's what you give up with the zone. The long-range shot. Try to take the inside away. But Smith, as he shows there, has got the range. Now what Connecticut would like is to see the ball go up the sidelines because that's where they trap.
Here's George with a steal. He's got Smith open. Takes it himself. Won't go down. Loose ball to Smith. Stripped. Got it back. Gets it again. Got it.
Yeah, just if it doesn't work once or twice, get it the third time and go up with it. That's been UConn's success all year. Get the steal off the press and go with it.
Stephen Key throws it away. Up ahead. It's Burrell. Count it, and a foul.
Now Mike Jarvis will probably go to a timeout. This is a great start for Connecticut and the kind of roll they get on. And right now BU has lost their poise against the pressure. This is the end of it. After the steal, they come down and cash in again. Freshman Scotty Burrell with the balance.
We have played better than 3.5 minutes here in Hartford. BU yet to score. They're down 9-0.
Scott Burrell sank the free throw to put UConn up 10-0 at the 16-19 mark of the first half. But the Terriers hung around, using their 3-2 zone defense to dare UConn to shoot from the outside. The strategy worked as the Huskies struggled to make shots.
Davey, the left-handed jumper for two.
BU is starting to settle down a little bit now. Some of those early nerves have settled in a little bit, and they've kept themselves in this because UConn's offense has been pretty spotty early in this game.
You're being kind.
They are not getting the job done. There's some seams open for Connecticut, big ones, but this zone's clearly bothering them.
19-13. Huskies the ball in the lead. Hennefeld looking to create. Back rim's a jumper. Oh, they've nailed that back rim all night long. Key shut off by Cerula. Gets it back. Key a three.
Well, BU is right back into this ball game, and Stephen Key gets his first basket, and that may get him rolling.
Stephen Key's three-pointer cut the UConn lead to just 3, 19-16. Key stayed hot, hitting another 3 to trim the lead to 1 with under 3 minutes left in the first half.
23-19. BU making a better game of it than anybody said they could, and Key drains a 3.
Well, the confidence now has picked up dramatically for BU. The fans behind their bench getting involved, and they clearly feel now that they can play with Connecticut, and they're doing it in this first half.
They are 3 of 3 shooting threes and only 6 of 20 shooting twos.
Well, they were threatened to be blown right out of the Civic Center to start this game, but Connecticut went cold, and the zone now has been very effective for BU. It's a 3-2 zone.
UConn would push the lead back up to 4, but BU cut it back to 1 as the half ended.
DePriest can't convert. Another big rebound from Moses. He'll just hold it, more than content with where BU sits at halftime. That's the end of the first half. Something of a shocking score out of Hartford. UConn 29, BU 28.
The halftime score had a lot of UConn fans on edge. Since the tournament expanded to 64 teams in 1985, a 16 seed had never beaten a 1 seed. Just a year prior, 2 number 1 seeds came close to losing, each managing to squeak out a 1-point victory. The most memorable of those close calls involved another Big East team, the Georgetown Hoyas, who escaped with a 50-49 win over Princeton. The second half seemed to start exactly how UConn needed it to, with Chris Smith draining a wide-open three-pointer to extend UConn's lead to 4, 32-28. But any good feelings a quick three brought to UConn fans quickly disappeared.
Here comes Key up the sideline. Gets it ahead, Davey. Key'll try. Hits a three.
Well, that's been Key's offense tonight. He's hit 3 of those.
And BU's got a lead. 33-32. The first of the game. Sellers jumps out momentarily. Key trying to lay it down. Couple of fakes for Davey. Count the bucket and a foul.
This is exactly what can happen if you let the underdog team get it going. If you let them off the hook, and that's what Connecticut did early in this game, and right now, good up fakes as Sella finally gives way. Fred Davey knocks it down. BU, all kinds of confidence.
17:26 left to go. There's a timeout. BU 37, UConn 34.
With 16:15 left in the game, BU led 41-38, and Jim Calhoun called timeout. After that, things turned around in a flash.
Moses couldn't handle the pass. George with 3 Terriers chasing him. Smith will fire. Hits outside. We're tied at 41.
And that gets the crowd back into this one. Both teams exchanging blows right now.
Hennefeld the steal.
Quick one. The Dove, he can do it defensively, and Mike Jarvis says, hey, let's talk this thing over. Crowd's back in it.
That's an understatement, Ron. 15:30 to go. A timeout with the score. 43-41, Connecticut.
Now they're back to the zone. They're more effective in the zone against the man-to-man. Chris Smith just able to go right by people.
NFL, little runner, won't go. Tap does.
Oh, the Dove. Stay with it.
He's got a dozen. Key, a nice move. Finds Davey. Can't hit. Burrell is there. Outlet to George. Huskies by 7 in the ball. Smith for 3.
Oh, Connecticut's got all cylinders going right now. Mike Jarvis says again, we got to try to slow this Husky machine down.
Jim Calhoun, out of a timeout about 5 minutes ago, has put it together. UConn 52, BU 42.
The first Smith three-pointer began a 21-1 Husky run that lasted just under 5 minutes of game time. The game-changing run may have been started by Smith, but was engineered by Nadav Hennefeld. In those 5 minutes, Nadav scored 13 of his 19 total points, including 8 straight. The run ended any thoughts of a BU upset, as the Terriers would never get closer than 13 points. From the time Calhoun called timeout with 16:15 remaining, BU would only score 11 more points the rest of the game.
DePriest jumps in for the steal. Lyman, the exclamation point. Oh, a 26-point Connecticut lead.
After the final minute played out, the final score was UConn 76, Boston University 52. The Steel Curtain defense forced 27 BU turnovers, 16 of those coming in the second half. The Huskies also nabbed 19 steals, setting a record for most steals in an East Regional first or second round game, as well as tying the mark for any region in the first or second round. UConn shot 39% from the game and only made 9 of 30 shots from the floor in the first half, which prevented them from setting up their full-court press. More made shots in the second half led to more turnovers, which led to the eventual blowout. Nadav Hennefeld and Chris Smith each scored 19 to lead all scorers. Hennefeld also added 7 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 assists. John Gwynn was the only other Husky to crack double figures, scoring 10. It was UConn's first NCAA tournament win since March 13, 1976, when they defeated Hofstra 80-78 in overtime. Chris Smith and Jim Calhoun joined Ron Perry following the game.
Big win for UConn in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Chris, and I'm here with Jim Calhoun, but first, Chris, what went through your mind here? You were really in a tussle for about 25 minutes, and all of a sudden a huge spurt, 21-1 run coming out of a timeout. What did Coach Calhoun say in that timeout?
You know, in the first half, we came out kind of sluggish. And in the second half, in the locker room, coach said, pick it up, pick the intensity up on defense, and just go out and play. And that's what we did in the second half. And we got that 20-1 run.
Again, Chris, you were there with the offense tonight, knocking the points down. And we're going to bring up a 3-point shot that you made. You seem to just have the confidence when that shot opens itself up, you're ready to take it.
Yeah, when coming down on our offense and stuff, and Tate looks at me in the corner, most of the time I'm open. So I just take that shot, and I feel pretty confident taking it.
Well, you look confident taking it. A couple of slashing moves, but again, Chris, the defense was there, the press, and once that got going, it was lights out. They had 26 turnovers tonight.
Yeah, that's our forte. Our forte is to play defense. We play that for 40 minutes, and we'll win. So that's what happened.
Nice job. I hope you keep rolling on Saturday. I'm going to bring the coach in here for a minute, and I know he wants you to probably get a little rest in the locker room now. Nice job.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, Jim, it was a tough ball game there for a while. 1 point at halftime. You haven't lost a game when you've been leading at halftime, but you kept it pretty tight here tonight. Just 1 point at intermission.
Well, we really did. And I think that for the first time all year, Ronnie, I called a timeout and said, relax. I didn't yell at them. I didn't push them. I just said, hey, guys, let's just go back to playing the way we play. And that's really defense. I think there's been so much made about the officiating and the tightness of it. Our kids were afraid to trap. And I said, look, foul out, but start playing these people up front. And we did.
That run in the second half was vintage UConn basketball this year. The press, the run, and Nadav really got himself in the middle of the offense there, too.
He's terrific. And once again, I think he's got such great hands, and anything's around him, he's like a vacuum cleaner. He sucks it right up. But the key to us is defense, and, we had to turn that up a little bit. I think we had great shots the first half, but we just seemed skittery. We keep nervous. And second half, I think when we get points off our defense, everything else seems to fall in place.
That's the way it's been all year long. Well, best of luck come Saturday, and you got one under your belt now. See if you can make it 2 on Saturday.
Thanks an awful lot, Ron.
All right, Jim Calhoun. The Huskies continue to roll. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, UConn Huskies, 1990 Big East champions, and maybe more as they advance now to the round of 32 here in the NCAA Eastern Regional at Hartford.
Assistant coach Howie Dickerman breaks down the win with WFSB's Phil Andrews.
Joining me is assistant coach Howie Dickerman. And, Coach, I guess what I'd like to know from you is kind of a rough first half for the Huskies, probably just feeling the Terriers out. What was said in the locker room at halftime to get the guys fired up?
Well, what Jim basically said, Phil, was that if we keep working hard, good things are going to happen to us on defense. We only had 9 field goals in the first half. We shot 9 for 30 for a total of 30%. We always don't put the ball in the basket the way we'd like to, but I think defensively we'll play 40 minutes. And so we wound up scoring twice as many field goals in the second half, and we created 19 steals, which is our trademark. And we also told the players to relax and enjoy a little bit. It's been an uptight team. From the dinner tonight to the bus right over here, it's been kind of a quiet team, and I just think that first time around for everyone on the team in the tournament. So I guess they did relax to a degree, but defensively they might have picked up a little bit, and as a result, good things happened.
Okay, Coach, there in the second half is when BU took their first lead of the game. Keys put them up by 1, and then Moses with a baseline basket put them up by 3, and you could almost feel the tension among all the UConn fans in the arena. All you could hear was the 50 or 60 or so BU fans that were there. And then all of a sudden the Huskies took over, went on a massive 21-1 run to actually put this game away. What was it that did it for the Huskies?
Arms, legs, hands. I think we were all over the floor at that time, and one thing leads to another defensively, and I think we turned the pressure around where we didn't panic, but we went at them and trapped them and double-teamed them and picked up loose balls and scored. And every time we score, we get back into our press again. As a result of that, one thing led to another, and that's why I think it was the turning point of 21-1, no doubt about it.
The Huskies had advanced to the second round of the tournament. Their opponent on Saturday, March 17th, the California Golden Bears from the Pac-10, who defeated Indiana 65-63. The Cal-UConn matchup was a rematch from last season's NIT second round, also played at the Hartford Civic Center. The Huskies won that game 73-72, despite trailing by 6 points with just under 3 minutes remaining. Tate George hit 2 free throws with 5 seconds left to clinch the win. The 1989-90 version of Cal were 22-9 and finished third in the Pac-10. They were led by 6'4" senior guard Keith Smith, who averaged 36 minutes per game and 16.8 points per game. He was also Cal's all-time assist leader. Smith felt confident heading into the game. He had scored 19 points in the win over Indiana, including 2 free throws to win the game. He also said that he wasn't too worried about the UConn defense, saying that, quote, "Only one guy can guard me at a time," end quote. And that while he had heard that the Huskies' defense was good, the Bears were ready, having played against Oregon State's defense, which was similar to UConn's, only quicker. James Brown, Bill Raftery, and UConn's public address announcer Roger Baker kicked things off on St. Patrick's Day in Hartford.
And hello, everyone. I'm James Brown. Connecticut is a state that's always been sort of a sports filler for both Boston and New York, but not this March, as madness is at fever pitch throughout the state because the state has something to call all its own, the Connecticut Huskies. Big East regular season and tournament champions, ranked third in the nation, and of course the top seed right here in the East. The University of California, on the other hand, has come a long ways in both distance and time. 3,000 miles and 30 years since their last tournament appearance, only to face the Huskies on here at their second home court in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'm working with Billy Raftery. And Billy, most of America is becoming familiar with Connecticut, mostly because of a very talented import.
Well, neither one of us could guard very well, James, so we could sit back and watch this talented performer. They trap very well. What he does best, plays the passing lane, deflects, and gets the spurts going for UConn, and they're devastating when they run.
California, on the other hand, is no pushover, has an excellent record on the road, and has a very dangerous perimeter game.
The country may not be aware of him, but Keith Smith, an excellent outside shooter, penetrator. They're going to have to get the ball out of his hands, but more importantly, the long shots, the rebounds. California's going to have to come up with the long shots if they're going to hang in this ball game.
All right, as you know, this is a rematch of last year's NIT second-round play that Connecticut won. California wants revenge. Connecticut wants the dream season to continue. Starting lineups in just a moment.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hartford Civic Center for today's East Region second-round game between the California Golden Bears and the Connecticut Huskies. And now let's meet the starting lineups. For California at forward, a 6'4" senior from Santa Ana, California, number 30, Bryant Walton. For Connecticut at forward, a 6'5" freshman from Hamden, Connecticut, number 24, Scott Burrell. For California at forward, a 6'7" junior from Renton, Washington, number 40, Roy Fisher. For Connecticut at forward, a 6'7" freshman from Ramat Asharon, Israel, number 40, Nadav Hanafel. For California at center, a 6'8" freshman from Walnut, California, number 15, Brian Hendrick. For Connecticut at center, a 6'9" sophomore from Florence, South Carolina, number 22, Rod Sellers. For California at guard, a 6'4" senior from Portland, Oregon, number 21, Keith Smith. For Connecticut at guard, a 6'2" sophomore from Bridgeport, Connecticut, number 13, Chris Smith. For California at guard, a 6'3" junior from Seattle, Washington, number 24, Ryan Drew. And for Connecticut at guard, a 6'5" senior from Newark, New Jersey, number 32, Kate George.
Cal scored on their initial possession to take a 2-0 lead. UConn countered and then took off.
California on the board first. This is Tate George to Nadav Hanafel.
Standard matchup for Lou Campanella in California. UConn uses the whole floor because of Hanafel. Good spacing, and they kick it.
Chris Smith. And the sophomore from Bridgeport with the three. Connecticut on top by one. Full court press. Sellers with the steal. Tate George.
Composure, James. They've got to go over the top, hit the post man, and look deep. 2-2-1 by UConn.
First steal of the game by the Huskies, who averaged 13 steals a contest. And they rely on their pressure defense, Billy.
Yes, they do. And, of course, to play the good matchup, you got to know how to play man-to-man. They got to walk.
And Bryant Walton, the senior from Santa Ana, California, actually was lucky that time. Could have been called for charging.
And, James, you think the crowd is an advantage in Hartford?
Georgia, 72% free throw shooter, nails both of them, and it's a 14-2 Connecticut lead. Just 4 minutes into the game, and California turns it over again.
5-second violation on the inbound. That's the knockout, the home run where they front the inbounds, the next logical receiver. And Lou May, in this half, used a lot of timeouts just to get his club calmed down. It's been a very difficult beginning.
Campanella will not like these numbers. In 10 possessions, his team has turned the ball over 8 times.
And he does not want to come out of this matchup. He doesn't want to play that man-to-man. The high-low fell. Great ball movement.
Smith for 3.
They turn the ball over with the best of them. Reverse the court.
It's a 17-zip run by the Connecticut Huskies, who trailed 2-0. They lead 17-2.
The 17-0 run started and ended with Chris Smith three-pointers, took only 4 minutes and 13 seconds of game time, and surely made the Golden Bears believers in the Husky defense. Keith Smith, hounded by Chris Smith defensively, was limited to just one missed field goal attempt in the first half, scoring his 2 points from the free throw line. The Huskies eventually built a 21-point lead at 34-13 on a Scott Burrell offensive putback and foul with 6:10 left in the half. The halftime score was UConn 42, Cal 26. The Huskies were 28-0 when leading at the half on the season, and that mark would not be sullied on this day. However, there was some bad news for UConn. Early in the second half, Rod Sellers re-injured his left knee and did not return. After the game, Sellers said it felt fine, but that he would have it re-examined early in the week. In the second half, the Husky lead would never dip below 12 points as they cruised into the Sweet 16, 74-54, much to the delight of the Civic Center crowd.
If there's such a thing as a dream season, this is it.
Chris Smith led all scorers with 24 points, including 5 three-pointers, while also holding Keith Smith to just 9 points, 8 below his average. Scott Burrell added 13, while Tate George and Adolph Hennefeld chipped in with 10 apiece. As with so many other games this season, the difference in the game was the UConn defense. Cal entered the game averaging only 13 turnovers per game, but the Huskies forced them into a season-high 28, including 16 steals. The 28 forced turnovers also equaled the season high for UConn, tying the mark they set against both Auburn and Hartford. Here's Wayne Norman's post-game summary from the Connecticut Radio Network.
Well, Louis should have known that a Campanelli couldn't beat a Calhoun on St. Patrick's Day. They had talked about Oregon State's press, and they felt they could handle pressure, and I thought they could too, and they're a fine basketball team. I just think in the first 10 minutes of the game, I think we were able to take it up to probably as good a match level to keep the ball out of Smith's hand and make sure forward handle the ball every single time on a matchup press. And obviously, we think we stunned them with a pretty good shot, and then we just played.
Calhoun said Chris Smith's defense totally took California guard Keith Smith out of the game.
Defensively, he had 24 points, but defensively, he was magnificent. I think many times that you don't get recognized for defense. It's nice when he's here now that he had the 24 points, but I think to play Smith, Keith Smith, we have tremendous respect for. Every tape shows he was a terrific player. Everything you get out of the Pac-10, he is a great basketball player, and by the end, he was having tremendous difficulties really just handling the ball against Chris, and I really think that really became a key factor.
Chris Smith says he takes pride in his defense.
Yeah, definitely. I hate when somebody score on me, it's a little pride thing. I just hate when a person score on me, and after he score, he looks in your face, and that hurts.
He also gets hurt when his coach looks at him when the man scores on him, too.
Keith Smith is normally California's high scorer, but in 37 minutes, he scored just 9 points on 3 of 6 shooting.
Today, they came after me today, and they made it hard for me to get the ball back once I got past half court. I just didn't want to put up a whole lot of shots with guys in my face and flying. I felt that, in those kind of games, you're going to have to find the right player at the right time. And I just couldn't get a lot of good shots up today, so I just didn't take a lot of them.
Keith Smith had 7 of California's 28 turnovers, and his teammate Roy Fisher had 10 and would have had more, but he had to use a couple of California's timeouts. He talks about UConn's pressure.
They just get all over you. They lull you into thinking that somebody's open, and you go to make that pass, and they got a bunch of quick athletes, so they just jump in the passing lanes.
Jim Calhoun recalls the words of Keith Smith motivating his team. Quote, "You've got to be very careful about what you say. They kept saying, 'I'm sure it won't be like the Oregon State press.' That's the kind of thing that you give the needle to the kids about. Oregon State probably has a tremendous press. I'm sure they do. But," end quote. Here's assistant coach Dave Lato again.
Yeah, we've played against presses before. We think we'll be all right. And again, our guys are like, "Oh, really? You haven't seen it yet." And the thing that I look back upon, because people have asked me, and then asking college basketball, why don't teams press as much? But if you go, there was a center who wasn't a real good ball handler. There was a power forward who was like a center, wasn't a real ball handler. Usually your 3-man was not as good as your 2. So you really had 2 people that had to make open court decisions. So, having Scott and Nadav and Chris work together made it really, really special. And so it was hard for Cal or anybody else to duplicate the anticipation, the quickness, the speed, and the camaraderie of what that press meant to our team. So I think that lit a fire under the guys that was already there because they knew they were pretty good. But okay, well, we got something for you, Cal.
Former Norwich Bulletin UConn beat reporter Pete Abraham, who now covers the Boston Red Sox for the Boston Globe, was not surprised that Calhoun found something he could use to motivate his team.
I think Jim's second sentence in the press conference was, "Well, I guess we're a little better than Oregon," like Oregon State, whatever. Yeah, he didn't need much to get people fired up. He would find some, he would have been really good. Oh, that was pre-internet era, but he always found his ways to see what was going on, and he was a voracious reader of everything we wrote. So he'd read, we'd all be there covering the other press conferences and stuff, and he couldn't wait to see what we wrote, to find one thing that he could say, this guy thinks he's pretty good. We're going to show him,
Chris Smith knew that Cal didn't stand a chance of pulling the upset.
Oh, definitely remember that game, man. And I remember those guys. I remember they were big. They were bigger than us. The guards was a little bigger than us. And I'm like, I'm not used to this because Tate George 6'5". I'm not really used to playing other teams that had guards that were bigger than us. But they were bigger than us. They were pretty good. But I just remember we was in such a rhythm. Our confidence was all-time high. And we knew that with Nadav and Scotty in the back right there, if they put that ball anywhere in the air, Nadav was going to steal that ball. Scotty was going to steal that ball. And I remember just, even Rao was just rebounding like crazy. And we were just in such a rhythm that they weren't going to beat us. Definitely wasn't going to beat us.
Here's Tim Tolikin again, following the conclusion of the first 2 rounds of the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised, but maybe not surprised that we struggled as much as we did against BU early, because it was like, it was the old, a 1 can't lose to a 16. And you're always, everybody that does that, whether it's Virginia, which finally did, or whether it's us, you're always worried about that. But at the end of the day, those 2 games, the BU game and the Cal game, probably more so than any other game. And maybe it was because those 2 teams were overmatched the way we played. Our defense in those 2 games, I believe it was 28 turnovers in one game and 27 turnovers in the other game. But our defense just locked people down, and it allowed us in both games, well, in the Cal game to pull away early, in the BU game to pull away late. But and it was a great way to leave, your home sites and head down to the Meadowlands. And we truly believed, we belonged in the Sweet 16. We didn't know how much further we'd go beyond that, but we truly believed. But it was, it was the first time really that the BU game was the first time since '79 that Connecticut was playing anywhere in an NCAA tournament. So, it was pretty special.
The Huskies were now 30-5, reaching the 30-win plateau for the first time in school history. They were off to East Rutherford, New Jersey for the East Regional Finals at the Meadowlands. Coming up on the next episode of the Dream Season podcast, the Huskies square off with the ACC regular season champion Clemson Tigers in the Sweet 16. The Dream Season podcast is researched, written, and produced by me, Matt Edwards. Written sources for this episode are the Hartford Courant Archives and the Norwich Bulletin. Audio content is from interviews that I conducted and YouTube. You can connect with the show via Twitter and Instagram at Dream Season Pod. If you have any memories to share about anything that I just mentioned, want to correct me on something that I screwed up, or just have general feedback to give, send me an email at dreamseasonpod@gmail.com or call and leave me a message at 903-884-8990. After I'm done with the regular episodes of the show, I'd love to have at least one episode that consists entirely of your memories of the Dream Season. Either leave a message at the above number or email me with an audio recording of your recollections, along with your name and location, and I will include them in that episode. As always, thank you so much for listening.